Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. I also undertake simple baking series, and this is my simple baking live where today we're going to be making the rather simple and humble cupcake. I am aiming for an evenly risen, level domed cupcake which is perfect in texture. Now, I won't overstate the term perfect here because in my last live session, I attempted to bake the perfect loaf. It was anything but perfect. So, my hope today is worst case scenario, we have a great cupcake to get along with. However, if we get a perfectly risen, good, lightly textured cupcake, that is a plus. I'll be talking you through my ingredient selection, the intention behind it, and also giving you handy tips about my entire process so that you can undertake a baking session at home in your own time with all the confidence. But before we get into it, I'm going to try and put my apron on, and we're going to get straight into this cupcake. So over here, it's important to state that any baking session one undertakes can be tailored to suit specific preferences. So one particular recipe is not one for all. Understanding the science of ingredients and the baking processes can help you tailor your specific ingredients and even the entire process to suit your needs. So in today's cupcake session, my hope is that the cupcake that I end up making is not overly sweet. I find that the size of a cupcake is such that it's almost a single mouthful, if you like. If you pick a cupcake, you're going to eat the entire thing. So for me, preferably, I'd like a cupcake that is not overly sweet. I would prefer a buttercream that is not too intense and sickly on the cupcake, because when that happens, I tend to scrape the buttercream off the cupcake, leaving myself with a sponge. I'm also hoping that we don't have a dry sponge of a cupcake, but more than anything, I am hoping that the cupcake rises well, settles in the cupcake case, because in recent times, even after nearly a decade of baking and tweaking my recipes around, I've recently found out that my cupcake rises and overflows the lip of the cupcake case, which is awful when you're undertaking a large bake, because especially when you want to decorate your cupcake, you want it to be evenly risen. The subject of whether a domed cupcake or a flat topped, I don't care. Okay, but I'm just hoping today we get a great cupcake that has great texture, that tastes great to eat, and hopefully you get yourself some tips. So over here for my first ingredient, we have sugar. Now this is a mixture of caster sugar and light brown sugar. There's real intention behind this, and the simple reason is that I don't want an overly sweet cupcake sponge. So I have swapped the caster sugar for light brown sugar, half and half, which is going to give me not too sweet cupcake over here, but the texture of the light brown sugar is also going to help give me a tighter settled crumb over here for the cupcake. If I used only caster sugar, I'm probably going to have a more delicate crumb, but more than anything, there's a touch of flavor to this cupcake, which is not too intense. Because if I mixed the light brown sugar, if I took that out and replaced it with dark brown sugar, which has more molasses in it, we're going to have a denser, coarse, structured crumb, but with strong flavor. And that's not what I'm looking for. Perhaps if I was making salted caramel, I would swap the light brown sugar here for dark brown sugar. But the intention for this half and a half today is because I want a bit of less sweetness in my cupcake, but with a hint of flavor, which is why I have the sugar light brown and caster sugar. I'll be leaving exact quantities of this in the description box at the end of this session, so worry not. And then we have margarine. For my cake, depending on preference and specific needs, I can choose butter or margarine. And for today, we're using Flora. Flora margarine, which is at room temperature. The English weather has a mind of its own. It's neither warm, it's cold, 1 minute, and it all changes. So sometimes I find that I tend to keep my margarine in the refrigerator, even to the point of baking, because it makes no difference taking it out to come to room temperature, unless we have that short summer season when I'm able to take my butter out. But even so, sometimes depending on how hot it is, it melts. So one good tip for me is, up until the point of baking, the margarine remains in the fridge, but when I take it out, I pop it, I scoop a bit what I need in terms of quantity, and then I pop it in the microwave at 50% heat, for about 20 seconds at 2 10 minutes intervals, and then you end up with a spreadable margarine to use. It's important to note that the structure of the margarine at the start of the baking process is key to the outcome you are aiming for, because if I melted this too much and the structure of that broke, we're going to have like an oily, runny margarine, which will be no use, especially for the creaming process. But perhaps if I was doing the reverse creaming, which is almost an entire different process, that might be helpful. But I need some structure to the margarine here. So what we need is for it to be well spreadable, but not broken and oily or runny. Now the next thing I need is flour. Specifically flour here, in the UK you can get plain flour or self-raising flour. And then for the plain flour, you can add rising agent, which is baking soda or baking powder. I find that no matter the measurement that it's required, I don't get it right, and then I lose control of how much leavening goes into the flour. So for my cakes, I prefer self-raising flour, which means the responsibility of adding leavening to the flour is completely eliminated, because in the UK, the self-raising flour has leavening agent in it. So I don't tend to add any at all, except for a chocolate cake. However, the cake recipe is the same one that makes a cupcake. But I realized that when I have tried to use the same quantity of self-raising flour alone, my cupcake doesn't come out great. And I find that it has something to do with the amount of leavening that is in the self-raising flour. So for my self-raising flour in a cupcake recipe, I mix a bit of the self-raising flour with plain flour, but still without any additional leavening or rising agent, which is helpful for me here. So over here I have a mix of plain flour and self-raising flour. Like I said, the exact quantities I will leave in the description box for you to see. It is 1 to 2. So say if I needed 300 grams of self-raising flour for the cake recipe, for a cupcake it would be 100 grams of self-raising flour and 200 grams of plain flour, and I find that has worked for me. But depending on what I am doing, I sometimes have to tweak those quantities, so I will leave the exact measurements down in the description box for you. Over here I have some buttermilk. I like a bit of buttermilk in my cake or cupcake recipe, depending on what the request and preference is. And buttermilk tends to slow down gluten formation, so it also helps to give me a very delicate crumb to the cupcake. So I'm using a buttermilk here. I've also used plain milk, which is definitely not buttermilk, but that also stops the cupcake from being too dry, if you like. So I will leave all that information there, but what I'm saying is I will not be recommending a process or a method or ingredient substitution that I haven't tried and cannot guarantee the results for you. We have 2 eggs that are broken over here and have been beaten to mix. I have some salt. Pinch of salt in your cupcake will balance out the flavor and enhance things for you. And of course we have some vanilla over here. Our baking today is going to be undertaken using a good old hand mixer, simply because of quantity. The quantity we have here is rather too small to be bothering ourselves with a stand mixer. As you can see behind me, I have 2 stand mixers. There's the Kenwood XL and the Kenwood K Mix. Both of them are great. I like the K Mix. I have created a whole review on that on this channel for you to check out. I bought it myself, paid for it with my own money. So trust that whatever I am saying on there is a matter of fact and is set in my own experience. So I will encourage you to check that out. But if you're a beginner and you are shopping for a specific mixer that is beginner friendly, I will highly recommend the Okma, which I have equally reviewed. I bought that with my own money, and I would encourage you to check those videos out. So I'm going to start with the margarine that's going into my glass mixing bowl over here, and then into that I will add the sugar mix and a touch of vanilla. There is a quantity of vanilla, but over here we just add as much as we need, and that's it. So I'm going to cream this. I'm going to cream this for maybe a minute or a minute and a half, because what we don't want to do is cream this too much for the structure to be broken, because then that affects the rise and how fluffy the cupcake is, and then it gets delicate, it rises, and then it falls. At least when I have used the hand mixer, I found that the outcome or my results are slightly different when I settle for the stand mixer. That is because I have a lot of control with how much whisking happens. But with the motor on this, even number one seems so fast, so you want to keep an eye on it. But if I was using a stand mixer, perhaps the creaming recommendation time will be slightly different. But I'm going to cream this for a minute, probably a minute and a half, and then I will be looking out for texture and appearance other than anything. Well, I don't suppose I need a minute and a half, because for however long I have been creaming this, it is changing consistency and color. So what I am looking for is the original yellow looking margarine has changed consistency and color. It is voluminous in here, and the color has changed to pale. That is what I'm looking for. In the past, when I'm using the stand mixer, I would recommend that the mixture is such that when you scoop a bit, it falls by itself. I have found that that varies slightly, because when I've used the hand mixer and gone for that observation, the results are such that the cupcakes falls flat and then overflows the cupcake case, the lip of the cupcake case, which means the rise is too much. So I'm probably going to stop here. It's steady on the spatula, and even though it is sliding, it hasn't fallen. I think that is just about enough of what I need it to be. And then I'm going to add the eggs in here. Eggs in baking adds moisture, but more than anything, it binds. So for the mixture here, the egg helps to hold the ingredients together. So here I'm just going to clear that, and then I'm going back with the hand mixer. Now with the eggs mixed in, the next thing we are going for is the flour, obviously. But before the flour goes in, we have a pinch of salt, which has already been added into the flour. And whilst we're at it, before we start anything, we set the oven on preheat at 165 degrees C. I will show you a tip that I use to bake my cupcakes right, especially in the oven, because I have hot points in my oven. So to get an evenly baked cupcake, I'll show you what I do. But I'm going to add the flour. If I was using a stand mixer, I would say let's alternate. But I'm not going to alternate over here because the quantity is quite small. So the buttermilk is gone in, and the flour is gone into. Right, and what I'm trying to do with the mixture here is to fold, because what you don't want to do is stir, because by so doing, looks like I'm stirring, by so doing, what you might do is break the air bubbles and overstir the mixture, developing gluten, especially with the liquid in it. So what you do is you turn the butter in and then cut through the middle to give it time to mix. But essentially, you don't want to overmix this too much. So this is the consistency we have here, which is a little bit firm. I would want to add a bit of liquid to it, but I'm tempted not to do that. So this goes in to kind of bring it all together. And I'll be careful not to use the hand mixer after here too much, because of the risk of over mixing the batter here. And essentially, that's our batter done. And with that, we have pre-lined cupcake tin over here. I have a scoop. You can use a spoon, and I don't want to waste time, but normally this would have been a cup of warm water. I wonder, yeah, it's still slightly warm. And that is because when you put the scoop in it, it makes it easy to scoop the cupcakes. Yeah, just enough. Yeah, what we don't want is the batter sticking to the scoop instead of going in the cupcake case. And this quantity, I never seem to get it right. I'm either making more or less. So the original quantity makes about 24 cupcakes, but sometimes I've gone up to about 28, if you like. So I have just adapted the quantity slightly just so that we have the 12 cupcakes we want to bake over here. Look. This is annoying. Well, that's the reality of baking live. And now I don't have an extra cupcake tin here. So we're just going to work with what we have here. Just wipe that off. And there we see. I'll keep an eye on that particular one to see how it comes out when we finish baking. Is it just me, or it is so annoying when... It's so annoying when you get this. It's not enough for a whole cupcake. it's not enough for a whole cupcake, but you don't want to throw it away either. I think I can make one cupcake. I don't want to overfill my cupcake cases, but this could make one cupcake. Okay, I'm just going to add bits and pieces to the batter, and then we'll see. If it overfills, that's on me. Right, let's see who needs a bit more. Right, okay, and just like that, we have 12 cupcakes. I have just stamped them on the top to rid of any air bubbles and to flatten the batter so that I can pop them in the oven. Now, a good tip for getting your cupcakes evenly baked is to make sure there is some moisture or cooling system in your oven. My oven over here, home oven, is a convection fan oven, which means it aerates when it's baking, but I also have some hot spots in it. I have an industrial oven over here, which is of course not going to be of any use, especially for 12 cupcakes. So what I do is that When I'm baking a batch of cupcakes, I think the home oven takes 36, 3 threes at a time. It's up, middle, and below. And there's a small spot underneath. So what I do is that I pop a tray of water or a pan of water on the base, the bottom of the oven, so that as it warms up, moisture cools down the oven slightly, so that the cupcakes do not bake too rapidly. What that does, what why can't I speak? What that does is that it settles the cupcake and it gives it an even rise. It cools it in the process, and the cupcake comes out rather tender. I've said a lot here, and I think I'm promising a lot. So let's pop this in, and then we'll come back later and have a look. Right. Now that we're done with that, moving on. The cupcakes are baking. So naturally, the next thing we want to do is prep for the buttercream. The buttercream we're going to be making is the Russian buttercream. It's the buttercream made from condensed milk and butter, a pinch of salt, and sometimes some icing sugar. Now, most recipes you will find don't have icing sugar added to it. I add the icing sugar based on what outcomes I am aiming for. And like I said, I keep repeating myself, you can almost tailor all the recipes to your own specific preferences, taste, mouthfeel, texture, and all that's between. So I'm going to be walking you through all of that today for the Russian buttercream. I have different buttercreams that matches different sorts of cupcakes. Today I just fancy something a little milky but not overly sweet, which is why I have chosen the Russian buttercream. But French buttercream makes great topping for a cupcake, and Swiss meringue buttercream, both of which I have in-depth tutorials on this channel on the homepage for you to check out for yourself. So I'm just going to move that away for a minute. I have condensed milk on here, and I have butter that is room temperature. I have butter that is room temperature, and it's spreadable over here. It's a little bit harder to stir in, but if you kind of mix it together, you have a spreadable consistency of butter. The consistency of butter to any buttercream is important, but more than anything, the quality of butter matters. I have found over the years when I've tried different sorts of butters, I won't be naming specific brands, but an investment in some good quality butter at a higher price point might yield you some great results, because it's all about mouthfeel and taste. I find that some own brands of butter leave a little oily aftertaste and oily feel on the tongue after eating the buttercream, but a good quality butter will guarantee such a smooth mouthfeel to certain buttercreams, which disappears on the tongue but tastes great to eat too. So when it comes to butter, I'm a little biased on the quality and expense that I like to shell out for. So that's just a bit about the butter here. We have, this is unsalted butter. I tend to go for unsalted in certain cases, just so I can add a pinch of salt, and then that kind of balances the mouthfeel and taste. Salt enhances buttercream. So if you want to have some complex and enhanced taste to your buttercream, try a pinch of salt to your buttercream. And also, I find that Russian buttercream is on the buttery side, if you like. Some buttercreams naturally have a buttery mouthfeel. I try to tweak my recipes to ensure that the butter to other ingredients are proportionate, because then if one is way more than the other, you end up with a buttery mouthfeel. For instance, for Swiss meringue buttercream, if your butter is not proportionate, and proportionate doesn't necessarily mean being equal parts, it just means that the proportion of one matches the other in a way where they are very balanced. So I tweak my recipes to ensure that mouthfeel, and it's all about technique as well. If the butter is not whipped well or beaten well to add air and change the texture right, then you're likely to still have the butter to the butteriness to your buttercream, if you like. So understanding your technique, timing, process, and observing texture is everything in making either a cake, cupcake, or buttercream. That's enough of buttercream lecture. That said, I am going to start by using the whisk attachment. I'll leave quantities in the description box for you. Now I am going to whisk this, adding in more air until the butter here turns from the yellow that we're looking at here into sort of pale near white. So this will take up to about 4 to 5 minutes, but you want to really beat the butter or whisk air into it enough for this texture to change. Because we're having just condensed milk and the butter here, it's important that the texture of the butter and consistency changes so that it adds to a great mouthfeel. So I'm going to whisk that and I'm going to be back. Now 2 minutes in, and I am liking the look of the butter here. This is not what we certainly started with. So because what you want is for the butter to change texture and color. Obviously, consistency wise, it's changed completely. But when you taste it, you can taste butter, but it disappears. It's not heavy on your tongue, which is a great thing. Now, I just realized that there were people on the live who were chatting to me. Unfortunately, I am a one-person production, so I'm unable to tend to the camera and answer questions whilst I'm on the live. But when I went out of the frame, I saw there's Kelly, there's Anthony. Thank you for being here and thank you for engaging with me on the live. If you like to leave more comments, I will respond to them when I finish the live session. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer you whilst I'm on the live, but I hope you're finding some value in this simple baking session. We're baking a simple cupcake which is already in the oven. I realized that we're probably going to have to wait for the cupcakes to cool, so I might just anyway, let me just keep that to myself for a minute and let's get on with this. So about 3 minutes, 2-3 minutes in, and we have the the butter that has changed consistency and color over here. I think on the chat, someone was asking me what the time is. It's in England and the time is exactly 2 minutes past 11 p.m. So I'm stood in my home kitchen at 11 o'clock baking a cupcake. Can you imagine? I love baking though, and I love cakes, so it's not such a bad thing after all for me. But I think next time I hope I can get some help or maybe set myself up properly so that I can engage with you whilst on the live. But back to the butter, what I'm going to do is add the condensed milk into the butter, and then we're going to whip that up too. We want to make sure it goes right in. Sorry, just just so that when it starts whipping, it will go. Condensed milk is so sticky, it's annoying, right? And let me just wipe my hands quickly over here. And that too is going to keep whipping. Now that has been going for a little while now. So about 2 minutes in, I am observing all of that, and I'll leave detailed information about the process in the description box for you. The thing about Russian buttercream is you want to be careful, because if there is a sort of difference or variation in consistency and temperature of the condensed milk to butter, it will curdle, because then it will break and it will look like cottage cheese. But I've been able to get the butter consistency right, which means it has mixed well into the condensed milk, and we have a lovely textured buttercream here. I'm just gonna taste that a little bit. See. Yeah, it's not overly sweet. It has a milky aftertaste to it. It's light on the tongue, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of icing sugar to balance, a little bit of icing sugar and a pinch of salt. The icing sugar over here is going to be about a teaspoonful or two, just to lift it up, because it can be a bit bland, if you like. And condensed milk is not everybody's cup of tea. In terms of stability, it is not a very stable buttercream, this one and French buttercream. If you want a very stable buttercream, you want to consider Italian or Swiss meringue, which are a little bit tricky, and Erman buttercream. But for me, it also, when you're choosing a buttercream, when you're talking about taste, stability, and all the other things that affect your choices and decisions about buttercream, key is what exactly you want the buttercream to do for you. I mean, we're frosting a simple cupcake that is going to be eaten or placed in the refrigerator. It's not going to be displayed in a summer heat or somewhere so hot. So the decision about whether the cupcake, the buttercream is stable or not doesn't affect anything for me. My cakes are normally filled with buttercream, but are completed with ganache, which has a very stable and stronger coating to the cake. So the decision about stability of buttercream is not actually my core decision influencer, if you like. Whether a cupcake is buttercream is stable or not doesn't really affect my decision about what buttercream I go for, because my cakes are not buttercream finished. I don't coat them in buttercream, because if you need the buttercream to cover a cake, then you need the cake to be stable. It needs to stay in a certain form at a particular weather, and you want to make sure that the cake is not going to melt or collapse on you. So when you're making decisions about stability of a cake or weather influences on a cupcake, then of course you want to think carefully about what buttercream you choose. But for me, it doesn't affect me at all, because it's nearly midnight. The sun is not shining. I hate to say it. So it really doesn't play a part over here at all. But it's worth mentioning that it's not a very stable buttercream choice. And so is French buttercream. So I'm going to whip this for another 2 minutes, and I'm going to check on our cupcake, and then we'll be back. So I'm back with that, and this is the consistency that we have. It has mixed so well. It is so light, and I'm gonna have a taste, because we just added some sugar and salt to it. So perfect. The salt brings balance. It's light on the tongue. It doesn't disappear, but it's not heavy on the tongue. I will encourage you to try that. And if you're worried about the buttercream being too milky, please don't be. When I went out of shot, Minky Moo was asking what I'm making. I'm making a simple, humble cupcake topped with some Russian buttercream. We're going to have some Kinder Buenos and a drizzle of caramel sauce on it.